This is the Business Storytelling Show, a top global marketing podcast listened to in more than 100 countries, live streamed on social media, and broadcast on DBTV. Christoph Trapp chats with industry leaders to help your company tell better business stories. Here's today's episode.
Hey, business storytellers. How's everyone doing? Thanks for joining me. Episode 614. Oh my goodness, we're not slowing down anytime soon. Somebody do the math. How long it will take us to get to 1,000? It might be a while yet. Friendly reminder, we are on Amazon today. So everything you see around me, the sound panels, the chair, the microphone. I guess you don't really see the microphone. There it is. All those things, they're all available in the carousel below. If you are not watching on Amazon, you're watching on DBTV, for example, just search for Christoph Trapp on Amazon and my storefront is available right there. You can check it out. One final note before we get to today's topic, the Business Storytelling Show is available on Amazon. So take a listen there. You can just scan that code right there and have a listen on Amazon or Audible, I guess is the other one that's tied into that. All right. So let's talk about today, the things we love. I ran across Aaron Ahuvia, who wrote this book somewhere on social media, probably. Very interesting topic to me. How do we get people to love our brands? How do we get in front of them? And there's multiple facets to that, right? First of all, we have to get them to pay attention. Then we have to tell a story that actually matters, and we have to stay connected with them. So let's find out what Aaron has to share. What are his tips? How do we even get in front of them? Maybe we should start there. Aaron, welcome to the show.
Hey, boom. Excellent. There we go.
Nice to see you. The fist bumping thing started during COVID when nobody was hugging anymore. Just fine with me. I'm not a hugger anyways. So tell me about, first of all, let's get started with why did you write this book? Why is it such an important topic to you?
I started writing the book just because I find the material fascinating. I actually did the first scientific work on brand love some 30 plus years ago. Just to get you how old I'm getting here. So I've been working on this for a long time. Yeah, so I did that. I coined the term brand love in one of my papers. So I'm sort of the brand love OG, and I've been working on it for 30 years. And most of the work I do, it's read very widely in scientific circles, but it isn't really written for a popular audience. And I wanted to write something that would take all of this work, because I think it's really fun. People enjoyed the topic, and provide it in some way that was fun and accessible to read. And so that's what we got here.
That's awesome. Really appreciate you putting that material together. Now, let's maybe dive into, first of all, you can tell fantastic stories, right? Mm-hmm. And if nobody ever sees them, if nobody ever reads them, or nobody ever watches them, you're not going to make a difference, right? You're not going to get people to love your brand. You're not going to get that consumer trust, whatever, which is interesting because I grew up in journalism where we owned the distribution back in the day. Right. I'm not getting any younger either. So I grew up in print journalism, and certainly we owned, right? Like everybody was reading the print newspaper. But how do we even start at the beginning? How do we even get in front of people and make sure our story even gets heard?
I think the best way is relevance. And that's particularly important if you're going to talk either about brand love or about brand storytelling. One of the things they have in common is they both require the audience to pay a little more attention than some other approaches to marketing. So there are approaches to marketing which are all based around, this customer doesn't really want to hear what we have to say. Let's make this really entertaining so they pay attention for a couple seconds, and let's get them to have some very, surface level thoughts about things. But if you want people to listen to your brand story, it's going to take more attention and more time, and they have to be willing to put that in. And the same is true for building brand love. Customers need to pay more attention and care more. And a lot of that really comes from relevance, figuring out ahead of time what is important to the person and being able to talk about something that is important to them. Because people will pay attention to things that are relevant and useful to them. Otherwise, you have to try and steal attention with, a cute baby or a good-looking person or whatever. But right now there's so many cute babies and good looking people in the media that's getting pretty hard.
You know what's interesting to me too when you talk about brand love is, so where's that line to brand love versus like it's just the thing I use, right? So for example, I got my Apple Watch, I got the MacBook Pro that we're streaming on, I got the iPad Pro over here where we're streaming to Amazon, and I have called myself an Apple fanboy. And then I got my Dunkin' iced coffee right here because I earn points when I get it, and they were going to Dunkin' Donuts anyways. But where is the line to I love the brand? I guess when I'm calling myself an Apple fanboy, that's certainly an indicator. But where's that line that consumers love a brand or they're just using a brand because you got to use something?
Right. That's the most important thing for people to understand. There's a lot of things about creating brand love that are pretty intuitive that people get. Like, you need a really good product. You need an excellent product. That is absolutely true. You absolutely do need an excellent product. However, a lot of people stop there. They think that, oh, if I have a bad product, people will hate it. If I have a mediocre product, they'll like it. And if I have a great product, they'll love it. And that's all there is to it. But that's not all there is to it. That's really step one. Step two is, I think, exactly what you're talking about. It's that difference between, do I love it or am I just using it? Right. So if the product is simply a tool that they are using to achieve some other goal, then no matter how good the product is, they may value it a lot. I'm not saying they won't pay money for it. I'm not saying they won't be interested in it and they won't buy it. Absolutely. But they'll always be looking out for a product that's a little bit more useful or a little bit cheaper, or maybe they just want to try something new. So you're not going to get that kind of involvement, emotional involvement, if they're not concerned with the tool itself. They're just concerned with something else that is going to produce from them, for them. For example, a Tylenol or a Motrin, right? Nobody cares about the Tylenol and the Motrin. They just wanted to get rid of their headache. And their focus is on the goal, and the aspirin or whatever is just a means to that end. You want to get off that. There's two parts to getting off of that. Part one is make the product or service itself somewhat enjoyable. So hopefully the more enjoyable, the better. Take out the pain points. But if there's some way you can make it a little bit entertaining and interesting and enjoyable, that shifts the customer's focus. Instead of, oh, well, just compare, for example. Lots of people say they love chocolate. Very few people say they love Tylenol. Why? Well, because chocolate is fun, right? Chocolate tastes good. It provides pleasure. The experience of using chocolate is pleasurable. The experience of using Tylenol is boring. Tylenol is just a tool to achieve some other goal. Chocolate is the goal itself. So that's part of it. You make the experience a little bit nicer. The other part, and we can talk for the rest of the interview about this part, because this is the part that's really surprising to people. People don't know about, and it's only going to work if you can get this other part too. And that is, you have to get the consumer's brain to start thinking about your product or brand using the same thought processes that it normally reserves just for people. So the human brain is hardwired. This is not just a belief that people have. The human brain is hardwired to think about people in certain ways using certain thought processes, and think about objects in other ways using other kinds of thought processes. And I'll give you an example of why that might be the case. Why would evolution do this very strange thing? Because it's in there. It's an evolutionary thing. It's not just like a decision that you make. Oh, it's an object. I'm going to think about it this way. Before you ever realize it's an object, your brain has already rooted it into the object thought processes, and you're already thinking about it in a certain way. Well, imagine you owned an alarm clock and it was broken. And every 2 hours or so all night long, it would go off, waking you up. And you try and fix it and you can't fix it. Well, the very reasonable thing to do is just get rid of that alarm clock. Well, then imagine that you've got a newborn baby in your house and it wakes you up every 2 hours. If we responded to that newborn baby the way we respond to an alarm clock, our species would be extinct a long time ago, where it wouldn't work. So your evolution is super concerned with, or super important from an evolutionary point of view, that you not treat people the way you treat objects, because we need to treat them very differently. And your brain has a built-in mechanism that tries to make sure you don't do that. So to get people to love things, it is possible, even though we usually think about objects one way and people a different way, it's possible to pull a little switcheroo and to do the opposite. So sometimes we think about people as if they were objects. And there's actually a word for that. It's called objectification. You've objectified that person. You're thinking about them as if they were an object. And sometimes we'll think about objects as if they were people. We personify them or we anthropomorphize them, are different words for that. And you've got to get people to do that with your brand or your product, because only if they're thinking about it in the way they think about people will they ever form a real emotional attachment to it. Will they ever love it?
It's very interesting. And while we're talking about things, just taking quick stock here of what people are clicking on over on Amazon. And one of the most clicked things right now is Aaron's book. So take a look. That's currently actually 48% off, according to Amazon, the Amazon data I'm seeing here. So make sure you click on that. And the other one I wanted to mention really quickly, you may have noticed behind me, is this fake plant. So what I started to do is I put this behind me because it just looks nicer. And that also is currently off 42%. So as you can see, I got that sitting behind me, and certainly I like it. I don't have to deal with it. And it's just there, but take a look. You can scan the code right there. So those are the two most popular clicked items right now on our Amazon stream. So take a look there. Now, I know you have an entire chapter on having a relationship with a thing. Now, what's interesting about this, as you were talking, what I was thinking about is, so like some companies, like people certainly have, consumers have a relationship with the people of the company, right? So like, it's very hard to like the business storytelling show as a consumer if you don't like me, right? You know what I mean? Like very, very hard, if not impossible, unless the guest just kind of runs the show. But then you have products, right? Like the Apple Watch. I could care less who the CEO is of Apple. I like their products, right? Or like my microphone or all those different things. So how do we actually build that relationship, that love for our product? And when you say, yeah, you have to have a good product, but like a lot of companies are producing the same thing.
Yeah. So the product, if it's really just the same thing, it's going to be harder to get people to love it. If they really just see it as a commodity that's one of 1,000 and they could just get anything else. If you think about a person that way, if you're thinking about a person just as like, well, they're the person who, I don't know, mows my lawn, but I could use some other service to have somebody else mow my lawn, and you're only just seeing them in that way, you're not going to love that person. You're not going to love that brand either. Now, you mentioned that you don't care who the CEO of Apple is, but a lot of people do care. And that's part of the way that Apple built brand love. It's not that you have to love Steve Jobs, but the fact that some people thought about Steve Jobs and connected him with the brand tricks the consumers. If you're a consumer, if you see Steve Jobs is very connected with Apple, your brain will start thinking about Apple using the same thought processes that it normally would reserve for people, because it's sort of fused in with this person. And Apple does that in other ways too. So Apple has a lot of ads that talk about like what kind of person uses Apple. For the creative people, the inventive people, not the square dorky people, etc. And so you develop this idea of what it means to be an Apple person. It becomes a kind of an identity. Any product or brand that can become an identity for the person that uses it, that really transforms the relationship. And instead of the object just being this plain old object that can be replaced by anything, it becomes a part of the person's sense of identity, their sense of who they are. And then it's much easier to form relationships. And that's very much at the heart of what leads people to love brands and products.
What's interesting when you just said that. So I was going to come right back, Aaron, and say, well, hold on a second. Let me rethink that statement for a second. I don't care who the CEO is. And I really don't care who the CEO is of Apple right now. But as soon as you said that, I'm thinking, I do kind of care who the CEO of Twitter is, or X, yes, because it's just too controversial right now. It's like, you like, why do I have to listen to all this controversy, right? So I think if the CEO of Apple would be more controversial, I probably would care. But since I'm so attached to Apple already,
Yeah.
right, for a decade or more, I guess 15 years probably, at this point it doesn't matter. But it would matter if that CEO goes too far into the negative, maybe, right? um
Yeah, the app. I totally agree with that. I was really thinking, as you said that, it's funny. I wasn't even thinking about the CEO of Apple today. I don't know who the CEO of Apple today is. I was really thinking of Steve Jobs, and it's just because he became so iconically associated with the brand. So it isn't really about the CEO. It's about some person who becomes really strongly associated with the brand. And a lot of brands do that with their spokesperson. That's why you hire a celebrity spokesperson, so they become associated with the brand. I don't know, for the listeners out there or the viewers, how many have seen the movie Air yet, but it's a great movie. I strongly recommend it. It's a lot of fun. And it's the story of how Nike persuaded Michael Jordan's mother to persuade Michael Jordan to lend his name, become sort of the embodiment of the Air Jordan shoe. So he put his name on the shoe and all of that. And it's quite an entertaining and exciting sort of business story. But they have a saying in there. They've mentioned, like, I think 2, maybe 3 times during the film. They say, a shoe is just a shoe until somebody steps into it. And that's perfect. That's kind of what we've been talking about here. An object is just an object. You're not going to love it until, in the case of the shoe, Michael Jordan became connected with it. Once consumers started to create a strong connection between the shoe and Michael Jordan, then their brain started to think about the shoe in very similar ways to the way it thinks about a person. And then you can start to develop an emotional relationship. And then you can care about this. I'll give you one more example, because I have a hunch we're near the end of time here. But I'll give you one more example for viewers that might make this clearer. And that's just think about yourself. There's probably been a time when there's been some object that you should get rid of. You're moving, you don't have the space, so you should get rid of it, or it's just broken, you should get rid of it, or you don't use it anymore, you should get rid of this. All kinds of reasons you should get rid of this thing. But you feel just terrible. You're attached to it. You don't want to get rid of it. You want to keep that thing for some reason. That kind of emotional attachment, that's brand love. In milder form, it's brand love in action. And when you think about why you want to keep that object, I'll bet that there is a mental connection that you have to that object. Either that mental connection is to yourself at a former time. So it's like, well, this reminds me of an earlier point in my life, or that mental connection is to another person. Like, oh, this reminds me of my friend, my wife, my child, my spouse, whoever it is. So that mental connection, the object to the other person, that's the reason you can't get rid of it. And that's the same kind of connection you need from a brand to get people to have that feeling of love for it.
How do you create like that connection, like what it says about you? I know you talk about that in your book, but like, and some of my friends who use Android devices, which I don't use at all, and I just kind of stumbled, not to keep picking on Apple, but what does it say about me that I love Apple, or I love Yeti microphones, or I love whatever, right? Whatever it might be. What's the importance of that? How it shows us?
Well, there's a lot of different ways that people get sort of identities around that. And that has to do with brand storytelling. Also is one part of that. So a lot of times when people create a story around their brand, the story will evoke a certain type of person or a certain set of values. This brand was created by, well, I'll give you Ferrari is a great example there. So I had the opportunity to speak with some Ferrari owners, and it's very interesting how they love Ferrari. They're super into it. but they all are really aware of who Enzo Ferrari, the founder of the company, was, and they're aware of things about his life, and they kind of idealize him as a person. So if the brand gets connected to either an individual person or a kind of person, like Apple is very associated with a certain type of identity, then it will attract people to buy it because they see it as, a representation of that kind of identity. And that's one of the ways that it really gets into people's sense of identity, their sense of themselves. So the kinds of stories you tell about your brand, if you say, well, this is the way it was created, then people who resonate with that, who feel that says that kind of story reflects something about their own values and their own priorities, that's a way to create a brand that people feel is part of their identity.
It's very interesting. How do do you think brands struggle with creating this, or does it come second nature to brands at this point?
Oh, no, brands struggle all the time with creating this and with keeping it. And, I'll tell you, you mentioned Elon Musk, not by name, but as the guy who owns Twitter. And there's a funny parallel between what happened with Elon Musk and what happened with Bud Light. Because both of those brands, Bud Light was seen as a very mainstream brand, but if you had to give it a little bit of a political skew, excuse me, if you had to give it a little bit of a political skew, it kind of skewed blue-collar conservative. That was sort of the aura that was around Bud Light. It was like a guy's beer when you're watching the football game. So it wasn't heavily political, but it had that kind of a feeling. And Elon Musk, of course, he was the owner of Tesla. Tesla's an electric car. Electric cars appealed to people with, environmentalists who like the idea of driving an electric car. So even though Elon Musk himself wasn't seen as politically all that progressive one way or the other, there was that image that was around that company, Tesla, because it produced these electric cars. And a lot of people bought Teslas in part because they were great cars, but in parts because they really liked the environmental statement of driving an electric car. And meanwhile, people were buying Budweiser to reflect sort of more of a blue-collar populist identity, but the companies switched on it. So Tesla, Elon Musk takes Twitter and takes it in a more right-wing sort of direction, and then you've got all these people owning Teslas who are like, I didn't buy a Tesla for this. And Bud Light, which had this big sort of blue-collar, mostly male following, takes a more progressive stand, and a lot of those Bud Light owners are like, wait a minute, I didn't sign up for this. This doesn't reflect my identity. And a lot of the anger that you hear from the Bud Light people is the sense of like, this was part of who I was. It was part of my identity, and now you've pulled the rug out from under me.
It's very interesting, and I don't know. I certainly have opinions about X, and I don't drink Bud Light, but know your audience, know who you're trying to reach, and play towards what they're after. Honestly, as always, the time flies when you're having fun. Aaron, really appreciate you coming on the show. Thanks everyone for buying a copy of his book, or at least clicking on the links. Really quickly, the last 10 seconds here or so, tell us, how do people connect with you? Who should reach out? Who do you like to work with or for?
I do consulting for a lot of companies, a lot of major companies, and I also do a lot of keynote speaking. I'd love to have more keynote opportunities to really get the word out, because I think that brand love has a great potential, but most companies, when they try and produce brand love, really do it incorrectly in ways that they don't get the results they want. And so I'd love to talk to people about how to get the results that you want, and have a little bit of a less frustrating experience. And you can find me online at drbrandlove.com. So all one word, drbrandlove.com. And you'll find my website.
Thanks for tuning in. Please rate and review the Business Storytelling Show on your favorite podcast platform, and subscribe so you don't miss the next episode. See you then.